Welcome to Women on Wisdom. I'm your host, Sandra Boyd, and this is where real stories meet urgent truth. It's estimated that it will take nearly 124 years to close the gender gap. That's just way too long. We can no longer depend on governments, workplaces, or even women's groups to lead the change. It's up to us to have the tough conversations, challenge old stories, and reclaim our power. The time for waiting is over. The movement starts now, one woman at a time. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Women on Wisdom, Episode 4, Pushing Boundaries. Today, we're going to dive deep into those limiting beliefs that we hold as women and how we can rewrite the script for ourselves and also for future generations. With us today is Kirsten Stanger, co-founder and solutions architect at TalentWise Collective, and Tammy Heermann. She's the author of Reframe Your Story. So if you don't have the book, go out and get it today. Tammy's dedicated to helping women challenge the status quo, follow their passions, and own their own power. So get ready for this thought-provoking conversation as we explore how to talk to our daughters about sexism, the hidden costs of inequality, and why it's time to take action now. Okay, welcome, Tammy and Kirsten. I feel that this is a big topic about pushing the boundaries. There's a lot to unpack here. Tammy, this morning when I was thinking about all the questions that I have, I know for a fact we're just not going to get through all of them. But this topic is really about how every single woman has a role to play in bridging that 124-year gap. And so let's get started. My first question is really about rethinking women's success. And I just want to say that although I've read your book, I went back and sort of reread the framework and all the rest of it yesterday. And Tammy's book is Reframe Your Story. It's an incredible book, and I think every woman should read it. But as we rethink our success and how we show up in the world, I will say myself, as I was growing up in the corporate world, and I like to say I grew up in the corporate world because I did, and it was very masculine. And therefore, I really had to emulate the masculinity. I learned from, some incredible men, some not so incredible men, but also the women that were my mentors also learned that way. And so the world is changing. And I think the first question I'd like to pose to you is how are society's ideas about women's roles really limiting what women feel that they can do and what success looks like?
Yeah, geez. So we're just starting with an easy one, right? Just right
Yeah,
across
I
the
wanted
plate there.
to start with
Yeah.
the easiest.
Yeah. And so certainly we've seen things evolve and change, slowly and since you were, but sadly, Sandra and
Oh,
Kirsten,
yeah.
not fast enough as we're seeing. So the stories we tell ourselves are shaped from a lot of different things as we grow up. So from our family, our upbringing, our cultures, our societies, right? And yes, things have evolved, but for the most part, studies are still showing that girls are socialized still, get along, play nice, speak when spoken to, make sure everyone's okay, community first, and whatnot, and kind of boys, the opposite, lead, fight for your place. There's natural hierarchies that form within boys, and that's okay. So all of that, for the most part, is still there, and to varying degrees across the world, obviously. And so this brings in, these mindsets and these beliefs that when we are in the corporate or whatever working
Yeah.
world we're in, the same thing. Take care of others first. Don't self-advocate for myself. We still feel that immense pull, and I know this will come up many times today, but between work and home and family and
Yeah.
the guilt that comes with all of that. So it's time. I think what we're talking about today is how do we start to reshape those expectations or those norms, first starting with ourselves, right? And questioning. So it's limiting in it because we're still seeing gender gap, we're still seeing gaps in levels of leadership in political spheres, whatever it may be. And it's interesting because it limits it so much. In the book, I outline a story where even just being told that they weren't good at something, girls would change their focus. So what I mean by that, it was a study done on university students. The professors made up a skill and said the top organizations are recruiting for this skill, and it was a fake made up skill, and they put people through the tests. And then of course what they did is they created groups, and gender groups. And when the girls were told that they weren't suited to this based on the results of their test, they were ready to change their major more so, or change the courses they were going to take more so than men. The reality was they all performed, relatively the same, everyone, on this fake made up skill.
Wow.
So we're so influenced, I would say, more so than males in this way.
Ah, I would agree 100%, and I've been there and I've done that. I'm totally guilty of it. Not just the guilt part, but the guilty of trying to fit into,
Yeah.
that world. Kirsten, tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting because I'll preface to say that I've spent my entire career working in very female-dominated industries. That it's been learning and development, it's been HR, it's been consulting. Growing up, I wanted to be a therapist or a counselor, and so as I was reflecting and coming in here, and I thought, have I been limited? Have I been limiting myself? And I said to Sandra, I don't know if I feel it, but I also followed a track that, I wasn't trying to push against something that wasn't, where I wasn't going to be like anybody else, and that my family did what I do now. And so I had parents that, this was just natural and normal. But I do think about all the time if, for people and women who go into doing something different outside of those gender norms, then, what they must be experiencing and wanting my kids to make sure my kids, no matter what they pick, my girls, that is something that doesn't come to the forefront for them, that they feel limited.
I have to tell you, when we first started talking yesterday and Kirsten, started telling me about how she was feeling, that she didn't feel that she had the same type of pressure that she's hearing. I mean, I'm sure she'll talk about sort of her awakening, in some of the areas. I got annoyed at first and thinking, what the hell? How could you grow up in this world and work and not feel the pressure, to align with this sort of, male world that we're in? But then I started thinking back as to why I'm doing this. And it really started. I mean, Tammy, you and I talked about the World Economic Forum. During COVID, it was
Mhm.
136 years.
Mhm.
We're at 124 years. But what we also know from the studies is that as soon as if we have, economics go down, we go into a recession, we have, more of the political bullshit that we're getting in the world right now,
Yeah.
or there's a war or anything. It that those numbers will go back up again. We think
Yeah.
it's like a ping pong
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah.
But when I started to think about it, and as we had the conversation with Kirsten, as I had the conversation with Kirsten, I started realizing, well, when I talk about this 124 years and I give the indicators of what they are, what makes that up, how
Mhm.
many
Mhm.
countries, and when I talk about Canada being 34th in the world and the US is 36, people are shocked. Like women that I know really well, they're shocked. And I would say probably back a number of years, I thought, oh, well, I'm doing okay. And I felt
Yeah.
the same way. So it's really is about this awakening. And there's so
Yeah.
many women out there that feel the same way that Kirsten feels. So, any comments or thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I think it also depends, in terms of your career, where you're working and in what structures. So, for example, if you're self-employed, or Kirsten, I know that you were in smaller firms, and so you didn't feel those types of things. But look at, for example, retail. Most employees are female, but when you look in the leadership ranks, they're men. Or if you were to, let's say, be a counselor in a hospital setting or in, some big clinic or in a big consulting firm,
Mhm.
my point is when you rise into formal leadership positions within a hierarchical structure, that's where we also tend to see the decline of women. But of course, when you're self-employed or when you're in a partnership, yeah, you're calling the shots, and that's amazing. And I think that's why so many more women, especially during and after the pandemic, but even before that, have been launching their own. And
Yeah.
yes, there's everything around female funding is not there, and everything, venture capitalism isn't there as much for women, all of that. But I think there's more women doing that than ever before, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely
And
right.
And I would say that, I mean, just talking about, leadership, and you're right. I also, never aspired working within any of the firms to move up into leadership. And Sandra, that was your track, that you were on. So yeah, you, even in some of those firms, you experienced different kinds of pressures. And,
Yeah.
as you said, needing uh, to emulate, sort of the major style that's there. I think part of what I feel is interesting as I was reflecting is I knew I never wanted to become a leader, or at least not, on a leadership team. That wasn't what drove me. It was doing the work that I was so
Yeah.
passionate about. I actually have guilt that everybody
Mm.
said you could, you should, you can be one of those people. Sandra, one of them, which is wonderful, Sandra. Like, great mentor and supporting, and Kirsten, you can. And you're right, I probably can. I don't want it. And so I almost felt like I was letting people down because I didn't. Maybe I could have, and I didn't
Yeah.
want it. So,
Isn't
it's
that
interesting, that kind
fascinating?
of guilt that I'm
Yeah.
not there fighting for it or doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Tammy, how can women challenge our stories that we tell ourselves? What are some of the things that we could do?
Yeah. So that's kind of where I focus the work that I do. And so much of it is around understanding the narratives that we're telling ourselves. So Kirsten just gave a great example around
Oh,
guilt,
yeah.
right? So really digging into that and feeling good with the decision. But because I spend my days, whether it's in workshop settings or whether it's with coaching one-on-one, there's a bulk of the women who don't know. Like they're just like, I don't know. And that's fine, right? But then that's the starting point. So I think women less so dream and have less freedom and time, let's be real, to
Yeah.
dream, right? So there's so much of getting stuck in the hamster wheel of just getting that damn to-do list done at work, at home, that the exhaustion is real, and now you want me to kind of aspire, right? So first of all, it's just what do you want, and I think creating that space for just saying yeah. And so I often work with like personal vision, not a career plan. I don't freaking care what your development plan at the end of the year says. It's usually bullshit that has read a book, go to a course, whatever. It's no, what do you want to what do you want to feel like in 10 years? What kind of legacy do you want? How do you want to connect with people? Like all of that, right? Having a broader kind of personal vision for your life is kind of um, relieving for women because there's so much pressure around just get that development plan, and it's more around the experience. What kind of experiences do you want? So for some it's like, okay, dreaming and defining and just not putting pressure and just saying whatever you want, just know that you can have it.
Mhm.
And then the other part, it's like, okay, if we're really honest, and studies have shown this, we usually spend more time planning for a big purchase or a vacation, or right now, like I'm decorating my daughter's dorm room because it's fun for me, right, than like planning my career, right? Like if we're being honest, we're scrolling more on Instagram than sitting down for an hour and saying, okay, what do I want to do? So if we can be honest there, then
We
studies
actually
have
would
shown,
spend more time looking for TV than we would
yes,
planning
yes, yeah.
buying a TV in this day and age. Yeah.
So there is that, right? And so I think having formalized ways for women to kind of get together and talk about these things is a great way to do that. So that's one thing. And then I always ask women, okay, whether it's in the chat or in the group, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want the first thing that comes to your mind. What do you think is possible for you? And of course, the answers are anything, anything I set my mind to. Sky's the limit. They're like, Tammy, what's like, don't you lead this kind of stuff as 2025? Of course, that's the answer. And yet, multiple times a day we self-sabotage ourselves. So anything is possible in the grand scheme of things, but then I'm sitting in that meeting saying, oh, I can't say that, I can't challenge them, I'm not smart enough, I don't know enough about that, right? So all of a sudden nothing's possible. So I talk about these micro moments, and we really first of all have to stand kind of what's shaping our beliefs and our stories, and then start to kind of do the work to reframe those.
And I think it is in those micro moments that we can create awareness. And also we've talked on this
Mm.
podcast in the first episode, the why episode, and we asked, the question, and I can't remember exactly how it was framed, but we were talking about the question on how we undermine other women and what we need to stop
Mm.
doing. So that was a big part of, and I talked about
Yeah.
myself, how I had said, oh, she had a resting bitch face on, or oh, she must be hormonal. And I have really, as a woman that's been through, perimenopause and menopause, I have really learned how like menopause can derail women and the emotions and all the rest. And then you're trying to
Mhm.
work in male dominated environments. So
Yeah.
I do think it is those micro moments of support for yourself. Is today self-care day or something? There's
Yeah.
something
Is
going.
it?
Yeah,
Really?
so it's kinda, yeah, it's something
Oh,
about
no. I
self-care.
wish I knew
I
earlier. I would have changed my day.
Yeah, me too, me too. But, so let's roll into, what I think is, a really big topic, and it's the talk. And it's really
Mm.
about, the talk is really about preparing our daughters for the real world. And so both Tammy and Kirsten, my video's going off here. I'm fading away. Anyways, both of you have really great stories. I mean, Tammy, you've written in the book about your daughter going on, well, your family was on a camping trip, and you talk about that moment of realization. And then Kirsten has a very recent story with her daughter going to a dance. And so I just feel like if you look at 124 years, it's not my daughter, it's not my granddaughter, but it may be my great granddaughter who will achieve equality. And
Yeah.
the question is, if you could each, I'm going to ask each one of you, is how do we have that honest, empowering conversation with our daughters about stereotypes and, the stories we tell each other and about their
Yeah.
worth? But also, I'd like you to share a little bit of those stories as well.
Yeah. Who would you like to go first?
Oh, I'd love you to go first, Tammy, and then
Okay, then
Kirsten
I
can
will go.
chime in.
So I actually have a couple of stories, but I'll just pick the one you referenced. And we were going for a walk, just an evening walk in our neighborhood, and we're starting out, and I was first in line, and my daughter grabbed my hand and pulled me backwards, and she said, "Wait, Mom, hold on, Dad has to go first." And I said, "Why does Dad have to go first?" Well, because Dad's the leader. To which point I said, "And why is Dad the leader?" And she said, "Because he's a boy." Like, ah, like my heart just sank. And so in that moment, at that age, I said, "Oh, well, that's interesting. What do you think a leader is?" And tried to get a little bit curious about what she was thinking at the time. And of course, we were off running down the street, probably to the lake and to get an ice cream. So she wasn't too interested in having this conversation at the time. But certainly, I must have impressed something on her. Just the fact in those few seconds, I said, "Oh, well, what do you think a leader is?" And anyone can be a leader, and it's not just the boys. And because 2 years later, I'm not even joking, we were sitting in our living room, and she said, "Mom, do you know why I said Dad was the leader?" And like I had whiplash. I just turned, like she remembered this from 2 years before. And I said, "Why?" And it was such an innocuous moment. We were camping, and dads took the kids on a little hike so that the moms could go, have some wine. And I don't have to do air quotes for wine. We were having wine on our walk. And what happened is they got to a kind of a precarious spot where they had to walk kind of down some steep rocks. And so the dads just said, "Hang on, be careful, everyone." And, the rambunctious little boys, like they usually do, "I'll go first, I'll go first." They went down, and the dad was holding the hands and helping, especially the girls down. So in her mind, boys go first, dads are the leaders, girls get helped down. from that one innocuous moment from when she was younger. And so when we talk about micro moments, it's catching these times, and there's millions of them, and I'm watching for them with everyone. I'm probably annoying sometimes, but it's, it's catching them. It's asking curious questions. And then I'll just kind of go through the steps that I follow, and then also using like real life examples. So, um, age appropriate. But now that my daughter's older, when the woman from France who was,
Oh,
severely,
oh my
yeah,
God.
abused at the hands of her husband and all the men that he let in, while she was drugged. And she said, and I remember that on the news, it was so poignant when she said, I will not feel shame, which is, of course, is what I think almost every woman feels
Yes.
if that happens to her. She said, I am not going to be shamed. I'm going to be public because every single one of those men should feel the shame, not me. And so we talked about that, right? Now we can when she's a teenager, but it's age appropriate kind of, real examples that you can have these conversations around. And then I would say, the two other things I do. So one is helping her have tools to respond. So she knows I'm in this work and we talk about it all the time. And so she said, you know what, Mom? She said, what I've noticed, I'm noticing a pattern. And she said, whenever I mention something I do, an activity, whether it was dancing back then or volleyball or whatever, she said, only the boys say to me, are you good? Like she'll meet new people, meet new guys, and only the boys. She said, no girl has ever asked me that. Are you good? And I'm like, well, how are you responding? And of course, at first, modesty. Well, I don't know. I said, no, you say, yeah, I'm good. Like you compete in these activities. You're good at them, right? Now, if you asked about cooking, maybe but right. So giving her the tools to respond and then just trying to role model, right? I can't shirk away from things if I expect others to stand up as an example. So that's kind of the how I go about these things. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
Kirsten, you want to tell your story?
Well, I mean, I'll admit that I'm going to use air quotes now too. I have not had the talk with my girls. They're 12 and 14 to set context. And I sat and I thought about it. I thought, it really hasn't been something that they've expressed, that there's concern over. Um, and I'm curious as well, because I'm not even sure it's something, whether it's talked about as much in school as opposed to other types of discrimination in the school system.
Yeah.
And so I do,
I think
I
that's a
wonder
really
what
good point.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, lots of other, other areas, all important to talk about. But yes, I've not once heard them, come home and say that they've learned about anything about women's rights or history of women and what's gone on. And it became even clearer to me, and I think I may have mentioned this earlier on in an earlier podcast, is that Berkeley, who's 12, said, there was grade 6 graduation, and there was a dance, and the boys had signed this pact that nobody was going to ask girls to go to the dance. And she said, that's fine. I was like, oh, that's good. You're grade 6. You guys should all just be going as friends. And then I stopped and I said, but also, it's 2025. Why can't girls ask boys? And she looked at me totally blank. Like just like she had no idea what the reference was, that it's 2025. I mean, for her it wouldn't matter. Well, what was it like in
Yeah.
2020? What was it like in 2015 or, 1850? So I realized, and I still haven't followed up. You're right. When you said your daughter didn't have the interest, she just sort of turned around on the stairs and went back up to her room, and that was it. So I still need to have the talk. And so this is, for me, very poignant today, is to pick up on some of these things and how to introduce the conversation so that they don't roll their eyes or try to like run away, and duck, which is typically what
Yeah.
they do if they feel like it's a serious
Right.
conversation.
Mhm.
That's, it happens organically in lots of other situations. So I need to figure out how to have the conversation, but have it feel organic and comfortable, and
Yeah.
I know what to say.
Well, and I think that's where like just having those micro moments when they come up, walking side to side versus sitting in front. We have lots in the car. The car is when like I'm just driving
Oh,
straight ahead and she's just, so lots in the car. Sometimes I'll just say, you want to go for a drive? And so you find what works for your relationship and your family, but it's rarely like, let's sit down and have the time. It's more like, how do you just,
Mhm,
see the times and the moments. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
when you think about the fact, and that really, what you said, uh, Kirsten, in regards to they're given a lot of information in the school system. And but one of those topics on the topic around women inequality, we're 50% of the population. And if you can't get it right, and we've been working on this for how many years, for, my grandmother, and I've mentioned this before, my grandmother marched for women's rights in the 1920s to get the vote in Ireland and was arrested and thrown into jail. So my family's been doing this, for quite a long time. And women before that were doing it. And we should be having more conversations and have more awareness around what's happening in those interactions. So, Tammy, if you could give other mothers advice, I mean, my kids are older now, married with partners and everything, and I certainly didn't have the talk. However, as my daughter went into the workplace, I did have the sexual harassment talk with her.
Mhm.
I said, you don't have to put up with this anymore. If anybody touches you, if anybody says anything inappropriate, I did have that talk with her, and did sit down and have that talk with her. But if you were to give women advice on having something a little bit more formal, because maybe we should be having conversations that are more formal as well, on top of those micro moments. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I think you have to know your child and whatever age they are. I think you can preface it first by saying, I'd love to talk about some of the things I'm learning in the research around, gender inequity. When do you think you might be in the mood for that? When would be a good time to chat? Some of this might seem bleh, like, again, depending on their age, right? And it's never just coming from mom. It's like, here's what I've learned. I'd love to share with you because I think it's really interesting. And you might not be seeing it now, but you might see it later or see it in others. So I'm always kind of just, trying to set it up as not so serious. And then, pick one data point you want to explain, whether with your daughter it's harassment, another it's negotiating their salary, with another it's being unafraid to speak up in class, like whatever it is. And then talking about the research behind it. And then just, have you seen this? Have you ever felt it? Have you ever experienced it? Right. So I like to kind of keep things easy breezy. There was another moment when I share in the book where my daughter was freaking out about a math test. And again, we're rushing out the door, and I just said, okay, sit down for a second. We will be late. This is okay, because these are one of these moments. And, she's like, I'm going to fail. I hate math, blah, 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 blah. And I said, did you know, really interesting, mom found these studies that when girls think they're bad at math, they actually do worse. But when they believe in themselves and they're told they're good at it, they do better. I said, isn't that weird? And she's like, yeah, that is weird. And so then we could talk about, okay, you've done your preparations. You don't have to like math. Like, who likes math, right? Oh, that's fine. That's fine. You don't have to like it, but you have to believe that with the right preparation, you could do it. Okay, can you try believing yourself today? Yes. Okay, blah, 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 blah. I won't tell anymore because it's actually a tearjerker of an ending in the book. But I think it's how do you just, again, capitalize on those moments and make it a real conversation. I think the other one is around sex, because boy, is that evolved since your age, my age, your age, all of our ages, and the ages at which people are more active now and all of that. And I have always taken a no holds barred, like, embarrass my kid to death when they were younger, but then, you know what, then they come to me, friends come to me, their friends come to me, like I'm the place they can come and sit, and we'll have a drink now because they can, and we'll talk about anything. And so that's how I chose to parent, so that no topic was off the table. None, like none.
I can't think anything wiser than that, because you don't want them to go underground. And you're hearing, I can think probably 5, 6 of my friends that when they were younger that were, you know, they basically were assaulted, sexually assaulted, and never told anybody and carried the shame. I mean, you just talked about that incredible woman. and I think her daughter's doing a lot of speaking out right at the her name eludes me right at the moment, but I I feel like having those open conversations where they feel safe is
Mhm.
probably the key to, making sure and that they will come and they will tell you,
Mhm.
and but also you're exposing them to, like, look what happened, the Me Too moment. It took one or two women to start speaking out, and then everybody, and I was talking to Kirsten about this yesterday. During lockdown, I was on a video with women, one woman that was older than me, a couple that were the same age, and then a few that were much younger. And I figured, the younger generation, especially some of them were quite young, they we started sharing stories. I wasn't thinking that they would come from the younger generation, but they started sharing stories as well. So
Mhm.
I just feel like this is really, we've got to stop carrying that shame.
Mhm.
So I think that really kind of flows into the hidden costs of sexism. You know,
Mhm.
we know about, I've certainly grew up in the, mansplained to death, the bro culture, the sports analogies and business. Oh my God. I just
Yes.
like every meeting you go to, somebody's using a sports analogy. And, I remember one time as an executive meeting, and I just really got sick of it because everybody, they were super, like, I mean, all into all the sports. I'm not. It's not part of what I talk. It's just not part
Yeah.
of my life. I don't watch hockey. I don't play golf. I mean, and I just said, "Hey, can we use a shoe analogy or something that's more
I
aligned
remember
to
that.
me?" Yeah, let's stop. But the hidden cost of sexism, and Tammy, I you know, I feel it's like I feel like over the years since I was young, when I started working, men would there would be innuendo, there'd be sexual jokes, there'd be I even had, like I had more than that. And you'd kind of just go, you'd smile and you'd get through it, you change the subject. If you didn't laugh at the joke, you didn't have a sense of humor. And then as you got older and I got more senior, it was a little less obvious. It was,
Yeah.
in other areas. And I just felt like it's been a thousand cuts, throughout my lifetime that's brought me to this moment where, you know what? This has got to stop. So my question to you is, how does sexism affect women's mental health and their self-esteem? Because it does.
Oh, it does. I just love this question. And we know, and just what you described too from research, that women suffer higher levels of certainly anxiety, depression,
Yeah.
rumination. And when you have half the population that is operating under this mental distress, right, and balancing the load that they're balancing, I mean, it's no wonder that women are saying, I just, it's enough. I can't do this, or I don't want more responsibility. I can't even fathom, accomplishing what I have right now. Or, um, and so then we see, compound. So the interesting thing about about mental health, and gender equality is it's both a cause and a consequence, right? It's on
Mm.
both sides. And so what's happening is then we see, well, then there's the leadership gap and then the pay gap, and it's fascinating because the most recent studies, Gen Z, right? A year out of university or college or whatever, wherever they're going, women are still 12% less in their salaries, that like right out the gate. And then we know how that compounds over time. And so I don't even know where to go with this because it's just so like, ugh. It's like, what
It's
do we
so
do with this?
big.
It's so
It's so
big.
big.
Yeah. So what's okay? So let's talk about some of the good stuff. Okay, so what's happening? We're talking about mental health in mainstream more than we ever are before.
Yep.
Some companies, are getting a lot more support in those areas, kind of in-house, kind of counseling psychologists. I'm hearing about that, like all of that good stuff. Because, like you, Sandra, I do remember a leader saying to me before, you can't bring your crap into the workplace. That you really have to separate, what's going on at home from what's going on here. And for him, it was just the brick wall and then never the two. And I'm sorry, but that just doesn't work,
It's
right? I
bullshit.
mean, yeah,
Mhm.
like there's professionalism. You have to be professional. And if you can't,
Yeah.
act in your job, then okay, then let's talk about that. But you can't just do that. And so I think what has to happen is, you know, equal weight and given to all work, unpaid work, support work, all the kind of the home, the caregiving work, all of that has to happen. That's one thing that will certainly, help that harassment, control over our own bodies.
Mhm.
I mean, what's happening to the south of us is just devastating for gender equality, right? All of that. So I think that's going to take some time to swing back in the other direction, and I do believe it will. I just don't know how long it will take.
Yeah.
So I think it's absolutely critical if we want representation. This is one of the areas that has to get addressed. Not to mention, like if you're just talking to the corporate folks out there who only talk about the balance sheet, how much are we spending and our companies paying for, right, mental health, loss of work days, all of that? I mean, it's
Mhm.
extraordinary.
Yeah, and never you talk about mental health as a whole, and World Health Organization is really speaking to the fact that come, they're talking 2030. If we don't do something right now, first of all, corporations are actually spending billions and billions of dollars on this. But if they don't, if we don't do something and start making, some extreme changes
Yeah.
in our expectations in the workplace, then there will be the next epidemic will be one of a burnout crisis. And we're starting to see burnout
Yeah.
culture everywhere
Yeah.
we look in corporations. Anxiety is an all-time high with young
Yeah.
people, young
Yes.
women. So I do feel that this topic, and you talked about women out of the gate having an issue in regards to getting lower pay when they start. But
Hmm.
what happens to those women when they have children is even
Oh,
more
that's just it.
devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when you have a child, it takes you out of the workplace for a
Yeah.
year. Someone just told me that she had built up a really good book of business, went away for 18 months, decided to take 18 months off, came back, and her was told, you know what, it's going really well, your book of business, with, Joe, who took over her portfolio. And yeah, so she wasn't given back her book of business. So, and that you hear those stories all the time.
Yeah.
But Kirsten, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Well, and hearing that story, well, I mean, I have so many thoughts swirling in my head. Which one do I pull out first to start with? Hearing that story, of course, for me, I stepped off, sort of the work path of working full time permanently, to be with my kids. That was just in our family and the way it was. Um, and one of the things you said earlier, Tammy, that struck me is that modeling. And so the one thing I feel that I am doing very well, and the way things have gone, is that even with being out for 13 years and still having a hand in doing some consulting work,
Mhm.
I've shown my kids that I came back to work, and I went into a more senior role in an organization permanently, and that I was able to do that. And how things have gone, that now I own my own business. And so I
Mm.
actually feel very empowered through some of these decisions and the way life has gone, that I can show that I can go from from doing that and be with my family. And I feel very fortunate as well, and worked for it as well, that I have been able to do that. Because historically, yeah, talk about the male being the leader. Also, in the family, the male was the major breadwinner. And so dad's career was always more important. It was known that mom's wasn't as important as dad's, because dad
Mhm.
makes the money. So
Yeah.
dad can't be there. Mom has to be flexible. Mom has to be there. And still a little bit like that. Um, and that's okay. That's still some of the truth about the reality of our jobs as well.
Yeah.
Kirsten, you should tell the story about the lunch in the boardroom with you and I. You need to tell this story because our colleague he was a very young man. really young and the most junior on the team. So, Kirsten, I'm going to let you tell the story.
Yeah. Well, and that was at the beginning, Tammy, you said something about, that women are still, girls still know that they have to do this and they have to, be looking after. And I think in previous conversations we've had with you, that women tend to do more in the workplace,
Yeah,
dishes, cleaning
yeah,
up, after
yeah.
meetings if there's food. And so in this situation, Sandra and I were in a meeting and there was a bunch of us around and our young male colleague. And we thought, okay, we all, let's pitch in. Sandra and I are picking up the plates and scraping them, putting them in garbage and go to put them in the dishwasher. And he stood up and walked
This was
out
like,
Oh,
and
he
this
just
did
wasn't
went
not.
back
very
to his
long ago,
desk. And
by the way. This is within 2 years, I would say. Is that right,
yeah,
Oh,
Kirsten?
yeah. And so then we thought, what do we do? Like, we were just so shocked. And we looked at one another and we talked about it. I was like, "But what do we do about it? Like, do we just tell them that next time everybody's expected to do
yes.
it?
Or next
Like,
time you're doing it yourself because you're a low guy on the totem pole.
We did
yeah.
talk to him. I
Yeah.
remember he reported it to you, but what was really interesting is, I'm leading the practice. He's reporting it to Kirsten. There's other senior people in there. And he just felt it was okay for him
Yeah.
not to clean the dishes or to
Yeah.
help with the dishes from the
Yeah.
luncheon. And I remember years
Yeah.
ago, one woman mentor I had, and I was going to be doing this, and it was more of a formal, we have, you know, admins and lots of, people that do all these things. And she said, do not clean up.
Yeah.
Don't. She told me, she
Yeah.
said, don't do it.
Yeah.
And I went to her and I said, "What's the big deal?" And she said, "See how all those men walk out? You walk
Mhm.
out the door too."
Yeah.
And the men
Yeah.
always walked out the door. But,
Yeah.
I know we're talking about sexism here, but these are the little things
Well,
that
but they're
make
little,
a
but they're
difference.
not little. Like for
Yeah.
example, the office housework
Yeah.
studies have shown that 200 up to
Yeah.
200 hours women will spend in a year. 200 hours. That's insane, right? And I keep an eye on the Pew research because they often
Mm.
do like how do young girls and boys spend their time? How what are gender thinking, has it evolved? And for a while there, yes, boys were having more gender equal views, but it's gone backwards now. Again, it's US based. But the thing is, so my daughter's had a couple of boyfriends, and she's come home in families where there's just boys, and then where there's boys and girls siblings. And she comes home and she says, "Mom, the boys not only don't help, they're not expected to help." And I said, "Isn't that fascinating?" So even in this day and age, we're letting our boys get off the hook. And I said, "So like, what do you do?" She says sometimes nothing, but as she gets more comfortable, she just says, "Come on, boys, let's get up, clear your plates, help."
Mhm.
Right? So that's a micro moment, and even she's saying, because this shapes, like, you think it's going to automatically change. No, then you're going to start having fights as a couple later, and do you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
we're still doing it, we're still letting them off the hook.
Wow. That's crazy. And so maybe you can sort of elaborate a little bit in what your thoughts are. You've talked about some of the studies and we've
Mhm.
talked about these moments. What what is an important, you know, I feel sometimes that in my family, I point these things out a lot. And I think you might have mentioned that you do that a bit as well. And that's becomes like, "Oh, here she goes again," or, even I remember when all the boys were teenagers and my kids are grown up, and, we would be away somewhere at a cottage, or we'd be in my friend's house in Florida, all the boys would sit there
Mhm.
playing video games. Well, my girlfriend and I would be dragging the groceries, and I remember losing my mind,
Yeah.
and, with, "Get off your asses, get out there in the car, bring the groceries in." But are we can we do it too much? How are we bringing this up where we're not annoying the world
Yeah.
around
Well,
us?
yeah. So I think it's how you do it and who you're doing it with. So, for example, if it's people that don't aren't directly in my family or reporting relationship, then I will do it in a joking way, but a serious joking way. So, my daughter better. I'm not going to make sure she doesn't listen to this podcast. So she had a couple of girlfriends over yesterday, and they're good kids, right? But they leave stuff everywhere, and so I
Yeah.
always use these. examples as a way to use my voice. So believe it or not, of course, I never in the past used my voice. I felt I had no voice. And so I'm always looking for practice opportunities, whether it's using it in a professional setting or using it home. So I just went, oh, no, Tammy, use your mother voice here. I went in, I said, hey, girls, please go get to all of them. Hey, girls, go please clean up after you. I'm not doing that. Okay, go get your stuff. So yeah, that's fine, right? Or to my nephew when he made a joke that he doesn't do dishes, but his sister does. Well, he got a little bit more of a serious talking to, right? So I think it just depends. I think you can do it. It's just what's your sphere. So I'd have no problem saying to that gentleman in the thing now, hey, come on, get back here. I literally would have went out into the hall and come on, your dishes don't wash themselves. Let's go. So I think I do that in more of a lighthearted way, but that people get the point. And then if it's your husband or your partner or
Oh,
someone like
well.
that, then it's like, okay, well, no, then it's like, hey, we need to talk about what equal share looks like here, and that kind of thing. So I think it depends who is it, and when is the timing, and what's the relationship to you. So I'm not going to do it to a stranger in a store, for example, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and people should know that that reason in COVID that we increased all those years
Mhm.
was because women took on the role of cooking, cleaning, groceries, education.
Mhm.
And
Home.
so what it did was it for a lot of women derailing their careers on top of the fact that a lot of the low level jobs
Mhm.
are in or lower paid jobs are retail and hotel, and
Yeah.
women didn't have the opportunity to work at that time or even
Yeah.
earn. So
But
there's
Sandra, that happened even when they were the higher earners. Even when they
yes.
were the higher, they
And that
still
is
picked
so
up.
true. Thank you for that,
Yeah.
Tammy, because you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Regardless,
Hmm.
after our talk during that time, I don't know if I ever told you this, but after our talk, I had two lawyers reach out to me. Two
Oh,
young
really?
female
Yeah.
lawyers reach out to me to talk about they said that their partner had a stay-at-home wife and
Mm-hmm.
had
Mm-hmm.
a live-in nanny, and they talked about how difficult it was to keep up with the work when they had kids and they were trying to teach their children, and their
Yeah.
husbands had jobs as well, and they were saying, this partner's he's living in another reality. How are we
Yeah.
going to talk to him, because when we tell him that it's really hard for us,
Yeah.
he uses the example, oh yeah, it's hard for my wife too. She needs to take time out every day to do Pilates, and the kids are off with the nanny. It's just like
Yeah.
it was ridiculous, but they
Yeah.
were feeling, and these are two professional women. But so let's go into sharing some stories. You have so many stories in your book, and I love them. You have the good, the bad, the ugly. And so let's talk about some of the stories where women overcame some of those limiting beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, I think, I mean, we can all look at the big examples, maybe because they're on the big main stage or they've written a
Yeah.
book or whatnot. And one of my favorite one of those, if anyone's interested in a big motivational story, is Samra Zafar. She came from Pakistan, I believe. She was a child bride, came to Canada. Was in an abusive relationship, had two girls, and through the help of coworkers and supports, she did escape, and so she's now like top 100 woman in Canada. I mean, she's won awards. She's just, I saw her speak. I was able to have lunch with her. She is such a bright light. And so not only did she get her degree, a master's degree in economics, she decided, oh, that's not what I want to do. So now she's an MD. She's a doctor. She went to medical school, in addition to all of the humanitarian work that she does. So if you
Wow.
want a big story, I love Samra to death. But for most of us, our realities is a little bit more nuanced, right? In terms of shifting kind of the narratives. And so I do have a lot of stories in the book, but I'll tell a contrast. So one of my favorite activities to do, I talked about having a personal vision. And so we do some work on visioning with the women, and then I have them say it aloud. So oftentimes maybe they're practicing their presentation skills or their executive presence or whatnot, but also we know as learning professionals that just by speaking your aspirations, that does something, right, when you're
Mhm.
telling people about them. And so I had two completely opposite examples. So one, kind of halfway through, the woman just started crying. She just stopped and started crying. To which point I said, you know, what story are you telling yourself right now? And she said, as I look around this room, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I don't belong here. Like, I look at all these amazing women and I have no idea how I even got chosen to be here. And so that was her starting point around her self-worth, around the value she thought she had. And of course the other women, as we do, and this is why community programs are and community is needed, is they just scooped her up, and she was in a scientific role in this organization. She literally was the brains behind the operation.
Oh my
And of
God.
course what she was seeing was like the marketing person and the salesperson and the, you know, who are like charismatic and this, and they're like, oh my God, like, I sell things, I add up numbers, like, we would have nothing to do here if you didn't invent it. You like invent things here, right? And they were scooping her up, but she was defining leadership in a way that she didn't see herself as a part of. She, all of these things. And so that was a really interesting mindset shift, I think, for everyone in the room, really, as we work to start to build her belief in her value and her contribution. So that was interesting and a really fun evolution to see. Another complete opposite example, same activity, is the woman kind of started tentatively. She was delivering it, and then all of a sudden something changed. Like, literally, her eyes lit up. She smiled and she started speaking more quickly. And so when she was done, I said, "What happened in the middle?" I said, "What new story were you telling yourself?" And she said, "As I listened to myself, I could start to believe it. I started to see myself in that new role as a partner or whatever it was." And so again, this is the why I love doing the work that I do, because it's taking, sometimes it's big things, self-worth, self-esteem. Sometimes it's just, can I see myself there? Other times it's, oh my gosh, I can speak up in this meeting because actually the senior leaders don't have all the answers either. I thought they were all knowing, and when I really pay attention, I'm like, actually they don't know either, right? So it's all of these small shifts. Those are the ones I love working on, because the small ones add up to bigger change.
Yeah.
I couldn't
And I
I couldn't
can
agree
I
more. Sorry, Kirsten. Go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say, well, I had this situation, sort of yesterday, because I think, having not been full-time permanent in the workforce, I guess it's imposter syndrome. I hate to say it, but I think there was some, for me, always, I've not been around that long. Do I know what I'm doing? Do I really know what I'm doing? I'm supporting others. And I had this opportunity in the past 2 days to work with one of our partners, one of our associates who's working with us, who was looking for advice. And, so I ended up spending a couple of hours with her over 2 days, just talking through and sharing. And I felt fantastic. It was just this awareness that, oh my gosh, like, she came to me because I have something I can offer and some value. And so I realized, I see this, that was just this little shift. You're right, that I felt invigorated and I felt proud. And I think it's these moments that will continue. I mean, I know I'll still have days where I'm like, ooh, do I really know what I'm talking about? But more and more, yeah, I do. I do know about some things.
Yeah. And then you remember it and you build it and grow it and grow it. That's what I love. It's the long game, but it works. It works, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I I know that in the work that we do, in the coaching, and that we're seeing more women that are, and maybe it's the burnout and everything, the confidence is, I know you don't like the word imposter syndrome. So you want to, let's talk about that. Come on, tell me more about that, because it's used every day and I use it all
Yeah.
the time. So I want to
I
know. Well, I want to know because I want to learn.
What should we be saying? Yeah.
know. So I wouldn't mind it if the word wasn't saddled to women. But here's the thing that I always share. Like, we associate imposter syndrome with women. And that's not the case. In fact, depending on the study you look at, it's like 84 to 86, something like that. A lot of adults in their lifetime will experience these feelings that Kirsten described. And it's especially prevalent along, high achievers, high performers, of which you are, or Or it could be, I'm in a brand new situation or role, so of course I feel that that's normal, but hopefully it goes away. Or for people who are in minority situations and they're always feeling other than, that can show up more so. But for the most, like 80, let's call it 85% of us will feel this in our lifetime. All of us, men or women.
Hmm.
But here we go back to socialization. So
Mm.
what are young girls, right, conditioned to do? Stay safe, don't jump, hang back. Whereas boys, come on, be brave, man off, jump up. The worst that can happen is a broken arm, right? So we can have the same feelings, but we're conditioned to deal with them differently. So it's not that I have a problem with the word. I have a problem that it's automatically associated to women, and it's not. So maybe we all just experience a crisis of confidence every once in a while, right? That's okay.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna
So
try
yeah,
watch my language because I've learned from your book. Language is also really, really important. So let's move on to um, I, I feel that in my quest to help bridge this gap and bring women together and create more awareness, that one of the things that I'm saying over and over again is we can't depend anymore on the government's institutions or women's group to bridge the gap. We can't sit back. It's one woman at a time.
yeah.
So I think my next question for you, Tammy, is why is waiting for systematic change a mistake, and what can women do today?
Yeah, so I think, so there's a few things, and so we do need systemic change, and it's just not where I work. But thank God, there's still people that are fighting policy and legislation and doing all of that. It's just not the position I come from. So you started the podcast, Sandra, by saying that each one of us can play a role, and I think sometimes women feel really overburdened by that because we feel like we need to do something big. And I think what we've been talking about all along is we just need to do the small things consistently, right? And so that's the micro moments of recognizing not only in ourselves but in others, right? And that's why I think the community so much can bond together, right? And so so what do I mean by that? I met a new woman. We were giving her a ride to somewhere, and I asked her what she did, and she said, "Oh, I work in this big, massive government agency." Okay, cool. I said, "Oh, what's your role? What do you do?" "Well, I'm kind of the president." I didn't know kind of a president was actually a role. I just looked at her. I said, "What do you mean you're kind of the president? Like, come on, girl." Right? And so just even in that moment, I'm like, no, right? And so we laugh about it, right? But it's these moments of how can we have community around us to kind of help bolster one another. And then if you want to get more, formal, sure, join an association, run for office, like whatever it may be. Give your money. All of us have places maybe we want to donate at the end of the year, right? Give it to organizations that are helping to advance women or
Yeah.
internationally, right, or whatever, wherever your scope may be. And so I think individually we can actually do a lot, but the first is how do we start to have that awareness for ourselves and for those in our immediate circle, just help shift some of these ingrained beliefs.
Kirsten, your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, absolutely, and that's where I was saying, even going back to, you're right, one person at a time. And I think, even in the culture work we do it, looking at organizational cultures, it's individual behaviors that all add up to shifting cultures. And so that's where I do, from doing some of that work, it does make me look at this as, you're right, it's what I do to change, it's what I do to help my children change, or be doing this, and changing beliefs and partners and sons and whatever it is, that, doing that. So it makes me feel less guilty because I already talked about some of my
Yeah,
guilt about, I'm not always doing all the
yeah,
big things. Less guilty. Those are things that are in my
yeah.
control to be influencing.
Well, it's interesting you said sons, and because I was doing a speech, and this one woman came up to me after, and she said, I was feeling kind of a little bit, left out of the conversation because I have sons and I don't know what to do. And I don't want to squash their confidence. I said, of course you don't want to squash their confidence. She said, what do I do? And I said, well, have you taught them or have you talked to them about empathy? Do they understand that leadership is about bringing people up, not tearing them down? Do they know the difference between confidence and cockiness? Do they know, right? And she just said, wow. She said, you've given me a lot to think about. Because we just use this word confidence, and of course she like we all do was equating it to the masculine meaning of confidence and the male
Mm,
trait. Yeah.
so interesting. I want to
Mm-hmm.
start this question off with, I know, Tammy, the work that you're doing, the leaders working with women in leadership. Um, what does true gender equality look like beyond, breaking that glass ceiling? I don't think we should use the word breaking. I think it would be the smashing the glass ceiling.
Well, I'd say the short answer is I wouldn't be doing this work anymore. You wouldn't have a podcast anymore. Wouldn't that be refreshing? I mean, as much as we love it, I mean, I'd go do interior design. I'd be decorating everyone's dorm rooms. But like that
Which is a
that's a
thing.
it's a thing.
It's a thing.
So so what does it look like? I think it's really not about trying to fit women into an existing, system. It's about changing the system so that it includes everyone. I think that's how we truly, know that we're there. And so rather than saying, women have to speak up more, it's like, well, maybe others need to recognize voices and speak less. It's well, we don't have to worry about our safety in the workplace, or if we go for a walk on the street, or that we have agency over our bodies, or right. So that, I mean, that's what true gender equality looks like. That we don't have to talk about that anymore. So I think, I hope you're optimistic. I'm optimistic. We have to
I'm
be.
very optimistic.
To me, it's just how long. But I think it will, because boy, wouldn't the world be a better place if it was run by women.
Yeah, I'm starting to see stronger women being more honest about what's happening. I think Me Too really cracked open.
Yeah.
It's I have this timeline that I show groups where we've come to in Canada, and it's just slow and plodding. Most women don't know, I think it was 1989, if you're sitting beside a guy, you actually didn't have equal rights in the workplace.
Yeah.
That law
Yeah.
was placed,
Yeah.
later than that. So
Yeah.
I feel like that we're pushing more, and young women I love. They're just fighting back and
Yeah.
pushing back, and they're pushing boundaries, which is great.
Yeah.
Kirsten, you do a lot of leadership work. Any advice?
Well, I mean, I think part of the other piece that I think going through COVID and how things are shifting is that there's a lot more talk around the role of empathy and leaders, and with awareness and talking about mental health and the importance. And so, I am hopeful that these are, if you look at any of the studies of the top skills, that's one of the top for men and women, and that has historically been the women. And so I do feel like there has to be more of a focus, and there is more of a focus in trying to foster and shift those sort of skills, or tapping in for leaders and all leaders, to be bringing that more. So when you're talking about women are doing things and things are shifting slowly, that's one of the key pieces that I'm really hopeful will help support
Yeah.
that going forward.
I absolutely agree. And I would say that we have to crack the notion of caring in childcare, because I agree with you, Sandra,
Mm.
that young girls and women are pushing more and more and more. And then when they get to the childbearing years, it's like
Oh,
none of that even happened, right? So they just forget that we revert back to 1950s, because everything around us tells us that still. So I think we have to crack that nut. And countries are saying population growth is slowing, so they want more. They want more population and reproduction, but so we have to crack that nut, because yeah, that's scary.
that is
Yeah.
probably one of the most important points of this
Yeah.
whole this is
Yeah.
definitely really, really important, and it's holding us back. It's like we're penalized for having children,
Yeah.
yet that's, that's so part of, being human, and, only the female population can
So
carry a
far, we're the only ones
child.
that can.
Yeah. So I've got we're coming to the end, and I think this is probably a conversation that we can continue in the future. And but in my opinion, I got some pushback about the concept and the premise of this podcast being all about women and not, bringing allyship for our males. And I just, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. I've had strong men in my life. I've had a father. I wouldn't be here if my father hadn't inspired me to be in the positions that I've been in over the years. My husband supporting me, all the rest. I have a son. So this isn't about male bashing by any means, but this is about women. And this, I want to talk about women. Right now, I don't need male opinion on this, and maybe later and further down my journey. But I wanted to ask you, why is it crucial for women to really focus on their own truths instead of, always seeking approval?
Yeah. Well, I think right at the end is exactly the thing. So it's what we're trying to do. We've been talking about it all along, is trying to reprogram the conditioning that we've had, for gosh knows how long. And one of that is, yes, speak when spoken to, follow authority, and authority's always been a male figure. I mean, I grew up with that, right? I grew up with
Yeah.
such a strong respect for authority, which is good. But when it's always men, then you're conditioned to say, okay, then I have to kind of ask. Or, oh my goodness, I was just in a store the other day, and this older woman was buying something. She said, well, can I return it? Because if my husband doesn't like it, then I want to be able to
Oh,
return it. And my heart just like I like, without those one of those situations, I said I don't talk to strangers, but I literally wanted to go up to her and say, if he doesn't like it, you keep it even more, right? Like, I was just
do
like,
you like
oh,
it?
I
Oh,
was like holding myself back, right? So yes, we're not where that nice little old lady was, hopefully, in our thinking, but we are still conditioned to seek approval, whether it's from a friend, a girlfriend, a mom, but us, also authority figures, which happen to be men, and their fathers were the first ones we grew up with. So I think it's great. I think we need something just for us, and you're smart. When you figure the time is right to bring someone in, you will, because of
yeah.
course we all want advice and mentorship from anyone, and so it's not about that. But I
Yes.
think we need to recondition that we can stand on our own, and that we can trust our intuition, our experience, and our expertise.
Oh, no, I 110%. So I've got one question that I ask every single guest, and I know that you're doing huge work in your business and your leadership work and the programs that you're involved in and the coaching. But I'd like to ask what you're doing to bridge the gap in your everyday personal life, besides trying to, rescue old ladies from
But besides trying to
wanting
annoy everyone
seeking
around me.
yeah, seeking their husband's opinion. So what are you doing to bridge the gap?
What am I doing? So we talked about professionally and personally. Again, I'm I try to be that person that can buoy others up. Buoy as in like float, not boy. And so again, another example, a daughter of a friend, who kind of asked me what I thought, and because we are taught to persevere, to just finish things, to just get through it, right? And yes, that's a great trait. And I said to her, there's also strength in knowing when to stop and when to say no, and to say, actually, what's happening to me as a result of this is not right either. That's strength too. And it's like, oh, so give yourself permission to leave, right? And so I try to be that person and watch for those kinds of conversations. I put my money where my mouth is. I like to support local and global. So I have a girl that I adopt in the Philippines. She's almost 18, so now I'll be looking at a new girl soon. And I'm now looking at some venture capital opportunities for female businesses and a female founder. And so I'm just kind of exploring that now. And so I try to support support things, not only with my time, but also financially as well, because I think So much is needed. So
Yeah, lots of work
yeah,
to be done.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I would like to say thank you to both of you for
Thank
being
you.
here today and for helping to give insight into bridging the gap, the 124-year gap to quality. And so have a great day, everybody. We'd love to hear your comments, and we'd love you to share this with other women in your life. We are at a crucial juncture in history, and our equality is not a nice to have. It is now beyond negotiation. This is our future, our fight.
This episode of Women on Wisdom is sponsored by TalentWise Collective, a global talent development company that curates solutions for your organization's needs and culture. Please note that the opinions and comments of the guests or hosts may not align with TalentWise Collective. If you are interested in having Sandra speak at an event, or wish to reach out for any other inquiries, you can connect through our email at connecttwc@talentwisecollective.com. That is, connecttwc@talentwisecollective.com. Thank you.